It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Donald Trump has secured a historic and shocking election victory in the US. Since then, Keir Starmer has said he looks forward to working with the president-elect. But there's no doubt the British Prime Minister is in a difficult position. During the US election, around 100 Labour Party staff campaigned in America for Kamala Harris, something the Trump campaign labelled blatant foreign interference. The UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy had previously called Trump a KKK and Nazi sympathiser, and even Starmer himself had criticised the president in 2019. Now the Labour government will have to work with Trump, at a time where America's role in Europe and its contribution to NATO and the war in Ukraine all hang in the balance. I spoke to ex-Republican Congressman and now outspoken Trump critic Joe Walsh about whether the UK should be concerned. Do you think that Trump will work with countries like Britain appropriately and fairly?
Not at all. It'll be worse. Understand what Trump is. Donald Trump is a very jealous and bitter man. Revengeful man. He knows and does not appreciate that our allies have laughed at him, but Donald Trump internalizes that, and so Donald Trump says, I want to get back at them. This is a big part of why Trump is so opposed to the UK and our allies, because he views you all as this elitist club, and he's never been accepted into that club. So he's going after all of his enemies, domestic and foreign. So get out of NATO, get out of all international treaties, screw our allies, forget about Ukraine. It may present a situation where our allies, instead of trying to coddle up to him, have to just push back hard and stand up to him.
I also spoke to Mélanie Garson, a professor of conflict resolution at UCL, about whether the bad blood between the Labour Party and Trump might persist. So let's talk a bit about what this means for the UK. What does it mean for the UK? What does it mean for Keir Starmer? What does it mean for the special relationship now Trump is going to be president?
Well, it's always been said that the US and the UK, the special relationship is strong, and we certainly saw that David Lammy and Keir Starmer were very much at the forefront of leaders to jump in and congratulate President-elect Trump. What will be interesting is obviously there's quite significant ideological differences between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump that will have to be bridged to a point. You might have found it easier with Kamala Harris. There's going to be challenges where we look at foreign policy, and this will come alongside with the UK going through some serious our strategic defence review, looking at what is Britain's place in the world, thinking about the US-UK free trade agreement, which they've been trying to get for a long time.
In terms of that relationship, one other thing I guess that might be an issue, Trump is a man with a history of holding grudges, and he's not too happy about the fact that people within the Labour Party were campaigning for Harris. Is that going to be a problem for Starmer? Is there a chance that Trump might remain sore?
Well, one would hope that he's going to have bigger things to think about. But you're right, there could be some animosity, and there have been a lot of questions in the UK whether it was right at all, whether it is the role of politicians from other countries to go and interfere. How would we feel if the counter happened in the UK? Or, and we talk a lot about electoral interference from malign actors, so, holding a gold standard to that, we should have to think about. And I think it is something we need to rationalise on, how political figures intervene and how political figures speak about other actors, and possibly a cautionary tale.
Trump had previously said that he would resolve the conflict between Ukraine and Russia in 24 hours. I think to a lot of people that sounded like he was going to cut Ukraine aid, which he's already spoken about, and essentially leave Ukraine out to dry. Do you think that that's a plausible possibility?
He's really not very smart. I'm going to end it in 24 hours. He's stupid. But his instinct will be, do what helps Putin. So if I'm Ukraine, I'm very worried. I believe Trump will put people around him that will pressure Ukraine to surrender. But I think in general, Trump is very weak. Trump's not a strong guy. If you want Trump to do what you want Trump to do, all you have to do is suck up to him. World leaders laugh at him. Putin and strongmen around the world laugh at him. Leaders of our allied countries laugh at him. They know how dumb he is, and they know how easy he is to flatter. Kamala Harris would have been a hell of a lot stronger on the world stage. Kamala Harris would have stood up to Putin. He's validated MAGA, and it is now the MAGA party forever.
He could, in the end, sort of benefit from circumstance. All the noises that we're generally hearing on the whole on the Russia-Ukraine context seem to point to wanting to avoid going into another winter. The fighting through the winter in this context is extraordinarily hard. So he may be the beneficiary of circumstance, but what we do know that, or what the alliances are concerned about is the NATO alliance and is the prospect of where US funding will sit with that NATO alliance. What will that mean for European defence, and how, and those will be many of the questions that certainly UK and European allies are going to be looking at over the next few weeks.
I mean, I suppose this is almost the fundamental polarisation on Trump's foreign policy, is that to his supporters he's a peacemaker. They'll point to things like the Abraham Accords, they'll point to things like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and obviously his detractors will say, well, he's an isolationist, he's going to leave Ukraine to be swallowed up by Russia, he doesn't care about any of his international allies. Can you be an isolationist and a peacemaker?
I think it's perhaps looking at it slightly differently and thinking about where bipolarity is a more stable world, if you want, than multipolarity. And I think what's different now in the US in particular is the size of mandate that Donald Trump actually has as a president-elect. It's very different to the size of mandate that President Biden had. When you have very, very strong powers with a strong mandate, other countries know that that leader can deliver on what they're going to do and still hold the country with them, so they're less subject to internal polarization. Then that helps check some of the powers, and that's where we get a little bit of returning to balance of power. And even to the point that Trump's reputation for that little bit of unpredictability also adds a little bit of stability, because people don't necessarily want to push onto the unpredictable.
You sound quite fairly optimistic, right? And I think, and some of the things you're saying, I think, are often the sort of arguments of, Trump's biggest fans. They say he scares Putin. He scares Kim Jong-un. Trump is a man who's unpredictable.
I think it's that combination. I wouldn't have said it if he'd won marginally.
Back in 2016, you said if Trump loses, I'll bring out my musket. You previously had claimed that Obama hates Israel because he's a Muslim. In many ways, you were really at the fringe of the Republican Party. Now you've apologized for a lot of your past remarks. You were publicly endorsing Harris. In many ways, is your opposition to Trump now, does it feel like repentance? Do you feel like you contributed to the Republican Party that you've come to despise?
Yeah, it always has. And very publicly, I've acknowledged that people like me help lead to Trump. And I've got to live with that. That is, as you say, my penance. But yeah, he's so dangerous that the rest of the world, it's a tough position to be in, because you don't want to antagonize him, but you're going to have to be firm with him. Because I think, world, this is going to be a more vengeful Donald Trump than you ever saw in the first term. He's got 4 years to do as much damage and seek as much retribution as he can.